The release of Crimson Desert has facilitated a reemergence of a discussion I find fascinating, being that of consumer expectations. As many have already pointed out, it seems like, depending on who you ask, Crimson Desert is either one of the best games of all time or the worst. Some people expected The Witcher in terms of story and character depth, and so were very disappointed by the story they were given. Alternatively, others expected a massive sandbox in which to explore, discover, and mess around, and so are extremely happy with what they got. Personally, I limit my exposure to coverage leading up to a game's release, and so knew very little about Crimson Desert before launch, other than how highly anticipated it was. I do this for multiple reasons, but the main one is I have come to realize just how powerful the effect of other people's opinions can be. Simply hearing a content creator I watch frequently say they don't like a game can influence me to not like it either. We humans understand that one of the best ways to determine the quality of a thing is to find someone with extensive experience with that thing. If we can trust that individual, then we can use that experience without actually having lived it ourselves. It's a very helpful evolutionary tool, but it gets in our way when it comes to media. To be clear, I am not telling anyone they are wrong for having any expectation that they did. From what I can tell, this is another example of a game that was massively overpromised, similar to the original Fable, if you know that story. Promises were made about being able to plant an acorn with the ability to return and see its growth. NPCs would age and destruction of environments would be permanent. None of these things were actualized in the final product, and yet, Fable is remembered fondly as one of the best games of its time. I posit to you that, if you are indeed an adult, you should have learned by now that humans get swept up in the excitement and energy of creation, and are prone to overpromising things. Sure, we can fault them to an extent, depending on how insincere their promises seem in the context of the final release, but what I see is raw passion that contributed to the game we got, whether or not it had all the bells and whistles that were promised. This applies to Fable and Crimson Desert. Creating a piece of media, be it a game, movie, or TV show, that requires input and involvement from many different people is not easy, and I think we should forgive people their shortcomings when they have clearly tried their hardest and delivered the best product they could. I am not saying to support projects and products blindly, or that companies deserve your time and money simply because they decided to create something. Rather, like many solutions in life, I am suggesting that much of the negative feelings you have towards a product like Crimson Desert are internal. I don't care if you like the game, to be honest with you, and so that is not the point of me writing this. Rather, I want to explore some of the criticisms I have heard and see if the expectations are reasonable. The first criticism I keep seeing is about the story. This is a massive game, and although I have put in over 30 hours as of writing this, I am nowhere near the end, so I'm only speaking of what I have experienced so far. The most disingenuous thing I keep hearing is that Crimson Desert doesn't have a story. This is objectively false. There is a clear narrative that the main character follows, being that of helping the people he encounters in the process of finding the other Greymanes. If people were saying the story is sparse and difficult to follow at times, I might agree, because that is the truth. But saying it doesn't have a story makes you look foolish, in my opinion. On the topic of expectations, Crimson Desert was meant to be an MMO before it was transitioned into a single-player game. Now, I don't know about you, but I've played MMOs before, and those stories are always unclear and disjointed because of the nature of MMOs. Expecting the characters and story to be at Witcher 3 levels is ridiculous, in my opinion, and I don't even know where the idea came from. This is an example of the type of expectation that sets you up for disappointment. The other main criticisms I've seen focus around the controls, bugs, and some specific gameplay decisions, and for the most part are justifiable and warranted. Not having a storage box in a game like this is a wild decision, but I think they were going for a more realistic type system where hoarding goods isn't optimal. Just a guess. Making the player jump every time they want to interact with something is certainly a decision too. The controls could have done with more testing, but in their defense, I honestly don't think gamers understand how difficult it must be to map all the controls needed for the game they built. They could have done a better job. And was it a self-imposed problem? Maybe, but innovation only occurs when people are allowed to try new things. Failure is a necessary part of excellence. I guess my point here is maybe get over it a bit The amount of whining I have seen about the controls is unbelievable. That said, I do see these as more realistic expectations, being for a developer to optimize controls and gameplay before release. Although we all know a perfect product is almost never released on day one, regardless of the company or developer. Looking at Crimson Desert through the lens of an MMO that became a single-player game explains everything, at least in my opinion, and expecting the game to be something other than that is foolish. Did the developers overpromise? It seems like they did in some regards, but much of what I can find suggests they have been more or less honest and forthcoming about the game overall from the start. Is it really their fault if you decided this game was going to be the best thing ever before you even played it? Is it really fair to expect a game this large, with this many different mechanics, to have a story like The Witcher or Skyrim? I don't think so, but to each their own. What I am arguing here is that if you can limit your expectations and exposure to others' expectations, you'll have a much better experience. Use the information you receive from developers and content creators to create your own opinions and tempered expectations, and you will experience much less disappointment. At least that's the way I see it.